There's nothing quite as comforting as gathering around with mom friends and sharing stories. Stories have a way of making us feel better, and they're great reminders that no family is perfect, and that's okay. So join us as we share some stories and laugh, learn, and grow together. It's the iMom Podcast. Welcome to this week's episode of the iMom Podcast. I'm Abby with Susan and Chloe and Megan, and this week we are talking about money, the Greens, the Benjamins, all the things that kids say that I don't say because I'm not a kid.
Bread. Let's get this
Is
bread.
it bread?
It's bread.
It's bread.
Okay. That's all?
That's old school.
Let's get this bread.
Oh, no.
That's old school.
Cheese? Cheddar?
Cheddar. Cheddar is my favorite underrated.
Cheddar. I don't know.
I
that
just
one.
say money. I just make it abundantly clear what I'm talking about, money. And Susan is sharing today's story.
Yeah. So my dad is the child of immigrants and became a banker. So if you can just take that really, you're careful about money, and then you become a banker. And so that just like adds to it. So I was brought up with an appreciation for money, and Mark and I kind of wanted to instill that in our kids. So our kids, did get allowance, and we had 5 of them, and they had chores, and we had rotating chore charts, so we were not discriminatory. Girls did do the garbage, and boys did do the dishes, and it rotated weekly, and there were favorite weeks and there were unfavorite weeks, but they got allowance based on half their age, so their wages went up over time. So we kind of modeled it after work, and they understood that when they got paid, they had 3 jars, and they usually kept them in their top dresser drawer. That's just where they decided, and each jar had a different meaning: save, spend, and share. And share was their tithe, and so 10% off the top had to go into that. And then the other 2 were split. What was ever left? So let's say if Megan was 10, she would have gotten $5. So 50 cents would have gone into the share. And then the rest, the $4.50, would have been split between the other 2 jars. And they could save, and then they could spend immediately. And I have to say, personality-wise, some saved forever and some spent. But savings had to be for something that was approved, something that they had wanted for a long time, or, was more meaningful or bigger.
Or you had to save because, $1.50 wasn't going to get you very far.
Yeah, so it took a long time to really save for certain things. But they did learn the value of $1. Now, the other thing we did is we had kind of appropriate level spending of things we would pay for. So let's just take my boys, for instance. They were into cool sports shoes. I mean, it was just, whether it was the latest Nike or Michael Jordan, whatever it was, they wanted the upgrade. Their friends had the upgrade. And so I would say, and I'm, pulling this out of my head from years ago, but it was like $60 I would spend on back to school shoes. You could upgrade, but it had to come out of your spend jar, because this was not a necessity. This was something. So it didn't come out of savings. It came out of your spend. So if it was time to go back to school and you wanted those shoes. And again, some of my kids were better at this than others. So they definitely learned that what work was and the value of work, that you got paid for it, and that over time, if you improved your skills, your skills went up. And then we also had up for grab jobs that you could do for extra money.
Ooh.
So these were things outside the normal rotation, like cutting the lawn, harder things you had to be a little bit older for to make money. And, they knew, that getting your driver's license was not going to happen unless you were responsible. And when you did get your driver's license, if you got a car, there were things you were going to have to pay for: gas, insurance. It was never a free ride on anything. They always had to have skin in the game. And then that kind of progressed. You do kind of start to see your kids' strengths and weaknesses when it comes to money, which was very interesting, what they were willing to spend money on, what they weren't. And I'll use one son, for example. My dad was a banker, and he was very much like my dad. And when he got to high school, rather than take AP classes that he was not going to study for, he dual enrolled. And he took some, community college classes to get the credit. And so he was off in the afternoons, and he had a lot of time. And so we kind of cut this deal. I could definitely see that he was going to be my finance guy. He had that good kind of brain and loved kind of analyzing costs. So we actually gave him some money. We matched. He had about $3,000 saved by this time. This was his junior year in high school. And we matched it, and we said, okay, with this money, you're actually going to go spend a certain number of hours every month with my dad, who was by now a retired bank president. And he's going to teach you how to invest this money. And then when you've made enough back, when you've doubled your investment of $3,000, you're going to pay us back, but you can keep anything you make on top of that. And it just didn't take him long to this day. And now he owns his own company and he's an investor. And so it just was a great way to get him interested in doing that in college. He wasn't the best student, but when it came to the practical application of money, he loved it. So that's just kind of where that went with one of them. I don't know. Did it help you at all, Megan? Megan is not a banker type.
Yeah, Megan, what's your perspective of?
Wait, I'm not a banker type. I worked at a bank for 7 years.
True.
Ouch. Ouch.
On the recruiting side, not the investing side.
We know who I have to understand the entire business. I was the recruiter for the entire commercial bank of a Fortune 500.
I apologize. Take it back.
Like, wow. I'm just
You don't
kidding.
get it.
Well, we know my brother is the favorite child, apparently.
Yeah, that's true.
Megan's not on the banker side. I actually
But
work
you're
for
not
a
the
bank.
investor type.
So, I mean, I am not the best at math. Let me put it that way. That was not my strong suit in college, but I got almost a full ride to college, and then I was off the payroll right when I graduated. And so I learned really fast how to support myself and how to, handle my rent and my utilities and taxes and everything like that. So, I think I also started working when I was 12. I would babysit every Saturday night for the same family. And I'm laughing now because now paying a sitter, it's like where I live, it's about $25 an hour for 2 kids. When I would babysit for this family, they paid me $5 an hour for 3 babies at one time.
Yeah.
So I would get like a $30 check at the end of the night. But I did learn that if I wanted spending money, I had to work. And so when I was 12, I started babysitting. And then when I was in high school, I taught swim lessons all of high school. And I did save a lot of it because I knew I'd want to buy a nice dress for homecoming or whatever it might be, or have spending money to go do things with my friends because I knew that my parents weren't just going to give me that money.
Yeah. Chloe, what was your experience growing up?
I don't think I really had an allowance. We would get money for like special jobs, but we didn't really do chores for money. I did not have a job, like a real job. I'd say I worked in like the nursery for like a little bit of money, but not a real job until college because my parents were kind of like, soccer's your job.
And school.
And school, yeah. Sorry, school and soccer was my job.
No, school was not her job.
No.
It was soccer.
Yeah. But like, we didn't do chores for money. We just did chores for chores.
Yeah, I'm same boat. Like I never got an allowance. If I mowed the lawn or if I washed a car, I would get like $15 and then I babysat. But I didn't have a job until April of my senior year of high school because my parents were always like, your job is school and to be involved and to keep your grades up and all that stuff. So it's like, as we talk about this, it feels like teaching your kids about money or helping them learn to manage money is something that really is like, the word sounds, it's like overused, but a privileged thing. Like you had the money to be, we have money to give our kids allowance. So what about the families that don't have cash or money and extra money laying around to give their kids an allowance? Half of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. You don't have disposable income to pay your kids to dust.
Yeah. And I will say that once I started working in college, my dad was really intentional about meeting with me and talking with me about, okay, now you're getting this money. What are you doing with it? And really taught me to save well.
I think those kids, though, are they more hungry to make money? I would wonder that, and that was kind of our goal. Our kids, make them hungry to work.
Yeah.
Like, in real life, if you don't work, you don't eat, is what I used to say. And so you've got to learn to manage the money, appreciate the money, and then be hungry for if you want more, and then always give money away. I mean, that was the fun part of their share jars when they accumulate a lot. If a missionary came to church or spoke, they say, "Can I give them my?" Yes, you can. Give them your money. Good.
Yep.
And feel good about that, or give them extra. And again, different kids have different personalities. We had kids who then take out of their spend or save and give to the missionaries because they were moved and had developed that appreciation.
Right.
So,
Right. What were you going to say, Megan?
I think it also instills a sense of pride in you. So I got in a car accident when I was like 22, 23, and my car was totaled. So I did get some money back from it being totaled, but I also had enough money saved that I could buy a little bit of a nicer car than what I had. And I paid cash for my car. And granted, it was the biggest check I ever wrote, but I was really proud of myself that I had enough money to not have to have a car payment.
Yeah.
And that was like my first big girl purchase. I was 22 and I was like, I'm literally dumping my entire savings into this car, but at least I won't have a car payment. And I was just like, wow, that was great. Like that was a good feeling. I was able to do it.
And I bet that was that's kind of countercultural to do at that age too, is to, put all your savings into something like that. So that's a really mature decision to make at 22.
Thanks, Chloe.
No problem. Hey, no problem. Keep up the good work.
I now have a car payment. because I didn't have a for kids.
So allowance is kind of a thing that a lot of people, debate. So even here on the staff, I asked the rest of the staff at Family First. And one guy said, in my house, we give allowances when chores or specific tasks are performed, especially with the older son. We don't give out cash. We just put it in his bank account. Bobby, our producer, said, my kids get, quote, allowance in the form of consistent meals.
Good job. He's feeding his kids.
I like
I'm
your
so proud of you.
parenting style, Bobby.
Yeah.
And then another guy said, I didn't get an allowance as a kid. I had responsibilities around the house, and then my parents would pay for things within reason, like to go to a movie or gas. He said bigger things would get pushed to a birthday or Christmas present. And that's kind of the closest to my experience.
Me too.
I had to pay for my own gas, but my parents covered me on other things. Yeah. So it's like allowance. What about the mindset? Because Susan, you said you gave your kids allowance. What about the mindset that people have of like, you're part of this family, and so you're expected to help make the house run by taking out the trash or whatever?
I think that's a great lesson. I think it's all about what you're choosing to teach. In my case, I was choosing to teach the more money you make as you get older, the more you can afford. You have to look forward to those things and, telling them, hey, if you want to have a car in the future, you're going to have to be able to afford. So you've got to learn. So that deferred gratification, teaching that as a banker's daughter and as a banker myself, because that's what I graduated with, is so important. And it was just important to us to teach deferred gratification. I think the other thing is contribution to the family is important too, which is why I rotated the chores. It wasn't so much who you are, how old. You all have to learn to do this kind of thing. But I think either way is fine as long as you're teaching and building something in the child. If you don't teach about money that way, you have to find another way to teach them. Because if you just give kids money and you don't teach them deferred gratification, then there is going to be a rude awakening of, oh my gosh. And I see this, you see it when kids get out of college. Like our kids knew you're going to college to get a job. And if you don't make grades or you don't do well or you keep having to change majors because you're failing out of something, you're not going to get to go to college. There's a reason. And I think you said it. We said all the time, 40 hours a week is your job at school. And so, we're paying for you to go to school. That right now we're paying for it. But it is having the conversations about what are your goals.
Yeah. The problem that I run into with allowance and stuff like that is that I never have cash. Like it's just practically speaking, I never have cash on me.
Venmo.
Right? Well, and like one of the guys said, we put it in his bank account, and I think that's great. But there's something
can't see it grow.
Yeah, there's something about holding the money in your hand that makes it more real. And even though in our children's futures, they're probably not going to use cash very much at all, so they do have to learn how, like, even the idea of money is still money. Like that money in your account is still money. But I mean, if I want to give them money to split into share, spend, save,
you got to have cash. But I kept an envelope. I did, because even then I didn't keep. I kept an envelope. But you're right, especially for a young child. They learn to count literally by in school taking beans or whatever and moving them over. I gave James. I had cash rare again. We were on vacation, and I gave James. I pulled out of my pocket. I had $6, and I was like, "What's this in my pocket?" Because I don't ever carry cash. And I gave it to him and go, "James, this is really big money to spend at the airport if you're good on your first flight." His eyes lit up. Like he kept it in his pocket. He was careful. So holding it is a big deal. And if it means going to the bank and getting out some cash, it's a pain in the neck.
Do you want to finish that story?
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
Then he went to buy something. It was twice what I'd given him.
Oh no! At the airport.
So mom had to find the rest.
Money pit.
See, I find that I get caught with I'll say, okay, well, I owe you $10. And then we end up going to Target and he sees something that's $15. And I'm like, oh, you can't have that. You only have 10. And he's like, well, if you do, it's just a big bunch of negotiating and keeping track. And I'm like, I just need, I need you to have cash.
Do your boys do chores for money?
They're expected to do a few things. We're kind of gradually ramping up. They're expected to empty the dishwasher, take out the garbage, clean their bathroom, keep their rooms picked up or whatever. They don't have, I came home from school every day to a list of chores. Every day we had to do chores. And my kids, I'm like, gosh, you don't know how good you have it. But I know that I'm not doing them any services by not giving them more responsibilities,
Yeah.
I will say the wonderful thing about our chore chart, it was a chalkboard actually. And so I erased the names every day and rotated them. There were many weeks they didn't get their allowance. If it wasn't checked off and I had to do it at the end of the night, they did not get their allowance that week. And then, you know what you learned from that? And I had a couple of these. Some kids are not motivated by money.
Yep.
They're just not.
Yeah.
And you learn which ones are, which ones aren't. And
True.
it's just such a great, as a parent.
It's a good learning.
It's great
Good
learning.
learning.
That's my other struggle right now because my younger son, the woman that nannied for us, when they were little, before they went into preschool, every year she brings them a birthday present and it's cash, the number of years old that they are. Aww. My son turned 10 in May. He still has his $9 in cash from the previous year because she put it in a box that you had to do not a magic trick, but a weird mechanical trick to get the money out. Yeah. And he just left it in there. So there's $9 sitting in the thing. It's just there. And he just, I find money in a drawer and I'm like, son, what you have a wallet. And he just doesn't care. He's playing on an old iPad that he can't download stuff on because it's an old iOS that you can't update. It's got a cracked screen. Meanwhile, his older brother mowed lawns for a whole summer to pay for a new iPad. He just doesn't, he's not motivated by money. He's not motivated to work, to earn. I'm like, well, what do I do with this kid?
It's hard. I've got 1.5 of those.
Yeah. He's also the kid that said that he would have a rabbit and live in my basement. I'm like, well, A, I don't have a basement.
Mine
and B, no.
Mine are all adults now, but the one who isn't motivated by money, it's starting to affect because her siblings are making so much more, and it's just kind of
yeah.
Should have majored in something else.
Yeah. And I mean, on one hand, I'm grateful that he is not obsessed with buying the new thing or whatever. I mean, it's really about balance, but you also need to earn money to, we have to start teaching these lessons.
Especially when they're boys and okay, if you want to have kids and help be a provider.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a lot of lessons in what you described, Susan, of work ethic, having a good attitude, of doing a job you don't want to do, doing things well. There's, I don't know, there's a lot of lessons beyond just money in
Yeah,
that.
I look at how our grandparents lived. Mark's mom was alive. She's 92. She was alive in the Depression, and they just have such a. If we had a Depression now, oh my gosh, people would just die because they don't know how to work. I feel like even our culture as Americans, compared to when we were in Italy, this girl shared with us. They were so lovely about, just extending our trips that we had booked for them and going over. And she said, we're just so thankful to work. We're so glad you're here. I don't get that feeling here. Yeah. It's hard to hire. We just don't have the, we haven't suffered enough
entitled.
Here. Yeah. We're very entitled.
So what do you, if your child does get a job, and that's interesting too. I think that, you get married and you might have grown up in one way and your spouse grew up in another way. So like, for instance, my husband is like, oh, well, when they get a job when they're 15, and I'm like, whoa, because like I said, I didn't have a job until I was 18. And I'm like, I don't want this. This is very a very privileged thing I'm about to say, but while my kids are kids, if they can do things around the house to help, I would rather they still have a childhood than have to clock in and out of a job after school. And, I would like to figure out other ways to help them learn about money. But like, if your child does get a job, how much say then do you have in how they spend that money and how they manage that money? Because they're earning it on their own.
That's a good point.
Well, I'm the opposite of you. I kept saying, you guys are going to get a job just because I feel like it's great time management skills. And my kids were involved in stuff. They played sports and everything. But in the summers, no, if you want a car, you're going to get a job. I mean, you're going to have to pay, you're going to have to earn the money in the summer to pay for the insurance all year. So we kept them a little lean that way. So they always wanted to. Wait, what was your question? I'm trying to think.
Well, like, what say do you have in how your kids spend their money if they're the ones earning it at a job?
Well, you don't, but that's the beautiful thing. They have to make wise decisions. We didn't have a say, but again, we kept them lean, so they were paying for car insurance. Megan, what else were you buying? I'm trying to think.
When I was growing, like in high school or when?
Yeah, like in high school. How you had jobs. You coached swimming. She was
just any activity
swimming
that
on a
I want
swim
to do.
team,
With my
taking
friends,
AP
like
classes.
if I wanted to go to like lunch with them, if I wanted to buy clothes, if I wanted to go to the movies, any extracurricular, anything, I had to use that money for.
So kind of what I
would say too. Oh, sorry. One thing I would say too is that I think was a really important lesson that I learned growing up was that I think now a lot of Americans and adults really struggle with is kind of just debt. Because I didn't really understand a lot about like how interest rates work and how debt works and everything like that. But the mentality is you don't spend what you don't have.
Right.
So I really got into that mindset of like, well, I don't have the money, so I can't buy it versus, well, take out a loan and just get it regardless and then pay really high interest rates or whatever it might be.
The debt conversation is huge in regards to what you were saying of you go into a marriage and if one of you agrees that no, we're not taking on debt and the other is no, we can take on debt. It's
different comfort level. I think in different levels of comfort as far as what you're willing to how far in debt you're willing to go.
Yeah, and one thing we this is just me, but we place a high importance on providing for their education so they can make money in the future. It's like our investment. So that was what we did spend money on. We saved for them to go to college, and it was our hope that they would be, the day they got out of college, you're on your own. And they really all were, all on their own. Did we help them buy their first mattress? Yes. Did we leave them destitute? No, but they all got jobs right after college. So that was our investment. They didn't come out with any debt out of school.
And so we also, who is Dale to you guys? Is he?
Oh, Dale Alexander has been a friend of ours for a long time. He's a supporter of Family First. I can't remember how we first originally met him, but just great guy.
Well, he has a great book called The Talk, and it's not the sex talk, it's the talk about money, and it's a perfect gift to like give to your teenage son or daughter because it can set them up for amazing financial security and success. Basically, he says that one decision changes everything. He calls it the Make 70 Your 100 plan. So whether your child gets his first job at 15 or 19, that paycheck, your first paycheck is going to be the biggest check you ever get, especially you get it consistently. Even if it's $100 a week or $100 a month, that's the most money you will have earned up to that point. And so the idea is, especially because you don't have like a standard of living set for yourself yet when you're 15 or 19, instead of spending all 100%, instead of spending that $100 check, make 70 your 100. So act like, oh, I just made $70 that I can spend. And then 20% goes into the save and 10% goes into the give. And so basically you sacrifice now, you can, give to others. And then you can also set yourself up for a solid financial future. And if you keep doing that, making 70 your 100, then you're always, going to be increasing your pay to yourself, but you're also increasing what you're giving and increasing what you're saving. And you're able, like if you start that when you're 15, you're accumulating wealth at a substantial rate.
And you're learning to live on less than what you could instead of more.
Right.
Which is often the problem.
Yeah.
Yes. Instead of living on 70, we live on 110.
Right.
In a lot of cases.
And get a credit card bill that then we're paying.
Yep.
Outrageous.
And I think that a big takeaway too for moms is that we pass down our money habits and our money attitude. Like, do you see money as a right because you earned it, or is it a gift that you're given, and that God provides to you? Do you see it as a tool to be used, or does it control you and your decisions? And then, what are you doing in the day-to-day that sends the right messages to your kids about money? What does your spending reflect about your habits, your personality, your desires, your cares? I think that those are the bigger things to pass on.
And I think it's fun to analyze your kids' personalities as you do this with them, because definitely I have a few that would give it all away. They get so much pleasure. It's just not that important to them.
Yeah.
They'll give it away. And then the others, you have to kind of train. It's so important to them and so much security. They're not going to give it away, help them find pleasure in the giving. It's like we do have natural kind of, money tendencies. It's so funny. It has nothing to do with anything other than something in our genes makes us.
That's interesting.
Yep.
So it was a really funny observation. So back to that airport story where my mom, Susan, gave James $6 to get something and I had to fund the other $6. But James put his money up on the counter and the lady took it and he got the little wolf stuffed animal that he was buying. And then he got this look on his face. He's like, well, I want my money back. And I said, well, you just bought something with it. You can't get it back. You paid for it. And I had to go through this whole explanation of that's how you get things is via money. And it kind of like crossed his brain that he no longer had his money. And he was just floored. Like he couldn't understand it. And I was like, welcome to the world.
Yeah.
This is your first lesson.
You can get it back if you give the
Welcome.
wolf back. So what do you do to teach your kids about money management? What good habits are you trying to pass on? I'll put a link to the Share, Save, Spend printable in the show notes, and also a link to the book, The Talk About Money. It's something that I think if you give it to your kids now when they're young, you're setting them up for big financial success. And thanks for listening. Thanks for listening to the iMom podcast. iMom is the motherhood program of the nonprofit organization Family First. Along with our fatherhood program, All Pro Dad, we exist to help you love your family well. Subscribe to our daily email, the iMom Minute, by going to imom.com/subscribe and get tons of great ideas, insight, and inspiration. The iMom podcast is hosted by me, Abby Watts, along with Susan Merrill, Megan Tigner, and Chloe Blumenthal.